हाँ हाँ, अब दिख रहा है। नो, आई स्टार्टेड द मीटिंग। आप पेज रिफ्रेश करिए एक बार।
Okay.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So yeah, so earlier setting was like only triple IT authenticated user can join. So that was he was not able to join. So I changed the setting. So now since our speaker, Mr. Anwar Sheikh, has already joined, he will be sharing his screen and probably presenting on a topic of distributed computing in practice, how distributed computing has been used in big companies. So he will be trying to cover that as part of today's kind of invited talk. So I'm very honored and happy to have him as part of this session. So welcome, Anwarji, and I hope you're doing well. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now you may please share your screen and we can get started without any further delay.
Okay.
So thanks everyone for joining, and it is a very exciting talk and I hope you'll enjoy. Thanks.
Okay. So let me see how to share the screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay.
At least saying Anwar Sheikh has started screen sharing. So I believe you need to share the screen. Yeah, but it at least it is there. Yeah, yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay. Okay. So hi, all students. So I believe we have students from final year of bachelor's and master's degree.
Yeah, so we have a kind of mix of students. So I think
Okay.
majority of the students are in MTech, but
Okay.
many students are in the third year and the fourth year of the BTech.
Okay. Okay. So nice to have this audience. So about myself, I am Anwar, and I completed my master's from Delhi College of Engineering, and I have around 10 years of experience in software development, and so around 7 years I worked in big data technologies. So as today's topic is distributed systems in practice. So this is related to big data, and that's why I was invited for this talk. So before we begin, do you know any distributed system, any software that is being used as a distributed system or a distributed processing system?
Spark.
Yeah, correct. Spark is one of them. Any other?
Torrent.
All right, yeah, that is also distributed. Yeah, so we have lots of systems which can do distributed computing, and we will see some of them. So this will be our agenda. We will be discussing these topics. Uh, what is distributed system and what are the data processing patterns in distributed systems? Then Lambda architecture, then some details about Hadoop, and then a few things about cloud computing, and then we will go over AWS and try a few things. So as most of you might be already knowing about distributed systems. So basically why we need a distributed system is because of so the single server cannot do the computing that we need. So we need to somehow distribute the load across multiple systems and try to achieve the goal in less time. Uh, and so there might be a situation where the data is huge, which cannot be processed by a single system, or there might be a situation where we want results in less time compared to one system. So if we deploy 100 systems, the result should be faster. So there are multiple scenarios where we use distributed system. So the goal
So
is
Anwarji,
to
sorry to interrupt. Could you be
have a
bit loud? I'm not sure.
scalable. Excuse me. You are not able
Yeah,
to hear?
at least to me, I mean, it is bit, your volume is bit low.
Okay.
Either probably, move your microphone near to your mouth or
Okay.
probably speak
Yeah.
louder.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. Okay. So the goal of the distributed systems is to achieve scalability. Means whatever data you have, if it grows 100 times, then also your software should be able to handle the data. Then performance. Again, as the data increases, the performance should not decrease. And the high availability is also another requirement where you want the system to be always available, and there should be fault tolerance in your system so that we have very less downtime. So the application should be always available. So you might have heard about recently the Gmail was down. So we can say there is an outage and the system is not available. So like these issues, we are trying to avoid with the help of distributed system, but still sometimes it occurs. Okay, so basically there are three different types in which we process the data in distributed systems. The most famous is batch processing, where the user can wait for a long time. So in the batch system, what we do is like we collect the data daily. Suppose this is one of example that we are collecting some data. So like in case of Twitter, we are collecting suppose tweets of one day, and then we are trying to run a batch process, which will try to find out some analytics about the batch, that how many tweets were there by country, how many tweets are there, then what is the trend for yesterday. So all those things we can identify using batch processing. Here we are trying to analyze the data, and user is ready to wait for hours or days to get the results. And basically we use MapReduce or Spark like tools for batch processing. Then another pattern is near real time. So it is not the actual real time processing, but we want results in minutes instead of hours or days. So the results should be there in minutes, but we don't want the result immediately. So in case of actually, so let's go to the real time also, and then we can compare these two. So in the real time systems, we need result as soon as the event happens. So if we receive one tweet, we need the result in case of real time. But in case of near real time, what we can do is we can wait for 1 minute and collect all the tweets, and then we can do some processing and produce the result. So that is near real time. So we have multiple events combined together, and we do the processing. In case of real time, we process each event directly and get the result. So the examples of near real time can be like this credit card fraud detection. So if the credit card transaction just now happened, so before authorize, so when we enter our credit card support password, and if so the transaction is given to the bank, so bank will check that yesterday this credit card was used in Delhi, and now today it is used in Mumbai. And so suppose there was only 2 hours of difference between the transaction, then the real-time system might block the transaction and say that this is a fraudulent transaction. So like this, some of the systems have the real-time requirement, so they need to process each event at the uh, whenever it occurs. So that's the real-time systems, and here we need the result in milliseconds. But in case of near real-time, we can go for minutes or seconds. We can wait, and mostly uh, Spark can be used for batch and near real-time processing, but we can't do real-time processing using Spark. For that, we have other tools like Storm and a few others. And by the way, the data ingestion tools also differ based on how you want to process the data. In case of real-time data processing, you need real-time data ingestion also. So there are tools like Kafka, which can be used for real-time data ingestion. And in case of batch processing, you can use our trivial tools for loading the data. Okay, so this is the famous.
So, Anwarji, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So, are you fine? I mean, the student can ask a question in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess Lucas have some question
Okay.
and others as well. I mean, if you have any question in between, yeah. So please ask.
Sir, about the Spark and MapReduce, I've heard. What about Storm? If I search for that, it can process per node. It can process in a super way. So please enlighten somewhat about Storm.
Yeah. So the Apache Storm is actually we have the clusters cluster, and so in cluster there will be multiple nodes, and each event can be processed by one of the nodes. So we have the Apache Storm as a cluster, and we can process the data in real time. But mostly I have not worked in Apache Storm, so I'm not sure, but this is used mostly. So I mostly work around MapReduce and Spark. So yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is the mostly used architecture for machine learning processing. So in case of machine learning, what we have, suppose in case of the previous example that we have discussed, like credit card fraud detection. So there can be 2 layers of processing. One is the batch layer and another will be the speed layer. So that is the real-time layer, we can say. So the data ingestion, you can see at the left. So the data will be ingested to the both systems, but the batch processing system will try to uh, process the data daily or weekly. Suppose it is trying to create some machine learning model on a daily basis, because machine learning model creation is a heavy process. So we can't do it in a real time. So and it will run for a long time. So suppose we are trying to build our machine learning model on daily basis. So the batch layer will always get the data, and daily it will produce some batch view which will have the machine learning model ready. Then whenever the new data comes real time, so that data will be processed in the real time. Like it will try to apply the model and check whether this transaction is a fraud transaction or not, and it will give the result. So using the output of batch and current transaction detail, it is trying to achieve the result. So this is the Lambda architecture, which is getting famous, and most of the companies are trying to process the data in this manner. Okay. So now we will move to Hadoop. So as most of you might have already heard about Hadoop. So it is a scalable data store and it can act as an archival store also, which also provides a querying capability, where you can process the data and obtain some result. It is fault tolerant. When you store the data, there is guarantee that data won't be lost. So we will see how it is fault tolerant. And it provides file system that is distributed. So we call it as a Hadoop distributed file system. Then there are tools like Hive, which we can use for running SQL-like queries. You can write queries directly and access the data from files. And it can act as archival store, and it provides some data formats. So the data formats actually are very important. There are multiple file formats like Avro, Parquet. So based on the data requirement, you need to choose the data format. So basically for the raw data, so whatever data we are getting from the input resources, input sources, sorry. The input data mostly is stored in the Avro format, because Avro is a dynamic format where it can accommodate addition of new columns, so that the input data can keep on changing, but you don't have to modify your processes that much to handle the new data. And in case of storage, generally we use Parquet format. So Parquet format also provides inbuilt indexing. The file itself stores index also, so it is easy to retrieve the data. So that's why the file formats are also important when we consider distributed systems. Then again, yeah, the schema. So the flexible schema. So whenever there is addition of new columns, you should be able to handle that as well. So Hadoop provides all this capability, and this at the petabyte scale.
So Anwarji, could you
Yeah.
go back to previous slide?
Yeah.
So when you use Hadoop, so it is
Yeah.
mainly for the text data or the time series data that you have, or is it also for probably the media data that we have, like images, videos, and so?
Yeah. So we can process any data which can be distributed in some manner. So we can suppose there are some videos. So if you have 1,000 videos and you can distribute one video to one server, if you have that capability of distributing, then we can process that also. So basically, whatever we can distribute can be computed on Hadoop. So yeah, the audio, video, images, and all processing we can do in Hadoop.
Okay.
Only in the case where you want all the results to be computed on a single system, then in that case we can't use Hadoop. So there might be some situations where you suppose if you want to sort numbers, suppose this is basic example, and you don't know the range of numbers. So the range of numbers can be between so that is unknown, and in that case, and you have data like which cannot be distributed. So these numbers, sorting of these numbers should be done on the single server. It cannot be distributed if you don't know the range of numbers. So this computation we can't do in Hadoop. But if you know the range of numbers, we can distribute the data such that numbers from 1 to 1,000 will go to the server 1. A number from 1,000 to 2,000 will go to the server 2. Like that, if we know the range, then we can distribute the numbers to different servers, and then individual server will do the sorting. And finally, we can collect the result from each server in the sequential manner, and then we can produce the output. So there can be scenarios where we cannot process the data using Hadoop. So hope it is clear.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so there are many applications. Here are few like searching. So for search engine also we can. So backend of the search engine can be built using Hadoop. Then for the log processing, So mainly Facebook uses Hadoop. So actually they created a tool called Hive, and they are extensively using Hive for processing their logs. So whatever logs we see, whatever ads, those are served on Facebook, and user login details, it's user login attempts, all those things are logged, and those logs are processed by these companies. So the logs are huge in size, so that's why they use Hadoop. Then recommendation systems. For data warehousing also we can use Hadoop, and for video and image analysis, yeah, like New York Times, they are using it. Okay, so we will now see have a look at the entire ecosystem. So Hadoop is not the tool that we can use alone. It needs to be complemented by other tools. So for example, at the bottom we have data ingestion tools. So if you see here, we have Kafka, Scoop, and Flume. So in case of real-time data ingestion, we will have to use Kafka. So Kafka, sorry. Here also, in case of data ingestion, we need to keep in mind that a receiver should be able to store the data that is being ingested. Otherwise, the data will be lost. Suppose you are ingesting 1 terabyte of data per hour, but the receiver can receive only 500 GB of data per hour, then the 500 GB will be lost. So that's why what Kafka does is that Kafka stores the data locally in a queue. So whatever data you ingest 1 terabyte within 1 hour, that will be stored in Kafka, and the receiver can read the data in its own speed, so that the data won't be lost. So we need additional storage in case of Kafka, and it is having a queue where the events are queued in file system, and then those are replayed to the receiver. And Scoop is used for batch mode, where if you want to read data from some database and store in HDFS, then you can use Scoop. And Flume is also used in it is also a tool for log data ingestion. So once you ingest the data needs to be stored in HDFS. This is Hadoop's distributed file system. So data will be stored in HDFS, and then it can be processed using the tools which are there at the top, like Storm for real-time processing, Apache Solar for indexing, then Mahmood for machine learning, Hive for querying the data in SQL-like manner. You can write SQL queries and query the data. Then Pig is also like for querying, but in different format. Then you can run Spark also on HDFS. Then we have this Apache and Cassandra. Actually, Cassandra stores data in its own file system, so it doesn't use HDFS. And HBase also uses HDFS. So actually, all these tools can run on HDFS, but there needs to be a coordinator which can schedule the job on the Hadoop cluster and direct the program. So in case of Hadoop, we have a cluster. So suppose there are 100 nodes, and if you want to run a program, then this yarn is the component. So it will try to schedule the job on a particular node. So out of 100 node, it will select suppose 5 nodes on where this process needs to run, and then on those nodes the process will run. Then Yarn will keep track of resources which are already allocated, and whenever new job comes, it will now then allocate the resources accordingly. So that's why we need this component. So overall, so there are combination of systems which makes a distributed system. It is not a single software. It is a group of softwares that make the distributed system. And
sir.
just yeah,
Sir, isn't it there are master and slave nodes here?
yeah. So we will go through that.
Because
the next.
yarn for distributing it's the assigning the jobs.
Yeah,
It needs it have to need the it have some master privilege. Then and say it can assign to the peers.
yeah. We will see the structure of Hadoop cluster, in that it should be clear.
So
So
are we also going to see what is this Hadoop map reduce?
yeah. We will just now go. Okay. So this is the Hadoop cluster. 1 minute. Yeah. So we'll see the details of Hadoop cluster. So Hadoop the cluster is divided into two types of nodes, master nodes and slave nodes. The master nodes are basically name node, secondary name node, resource manager, and in case of HBase, it is HBase master. And we have slave nodes. Those are the basically data nodes and worker nodes. So the data node means these are the nodes where the data will be stored, and also on the same nodes the processing will be done. So and actually in case of Hadoop, the number of servers would be more. So suppose you have around 300 servers, and in a data center, basically there are racks. Each rack is having multiple servers, and so what each rack is having is that each rack will have its own power supply, and there can be a if there is any problem there or a disaster, suppose then suppose one rack is destroyed, then another rack may be available. So that's why for the fault tolerance also we have the servers in different rack. So if one rack fails, other rack is available. And whenever we store the data is stored across multiple racks, so that there is no loss of data. Coming back to the master nodes, there is a name node. So name node is basically responsible for storing the metadata about where the data is stored. So if you store one file of suppose a 300 GB, so this 300 GB file is suppose stored on 5 servers. So the name node will keep track that on which 5 servers and from what starting byte to what byte the data is stored. So all that information is actually kept by the name node. Then we have secondary name node. So in case the name node fails, the secondary name node takes the control and provides the metadata for processing. Then we have resource manager. So resource manager will keep track of the disk space available in the cluster, and also the RAM available, and also the sorry, not the disk space. The resource manager is basically responsible for the number of cores and RAM available in the cluster. So whenever a job starts, the basic requirement is that these many cores or CPUs should be available, and this much RAM should be available. Then the job can start. So all that information is tracked by the resource manager. Yeah, and same for the HBase master. So we are not going into detail. So this is the basic structure, and we will see the HDFS. Okay. Yeah. So HDFS can handle 10,000 of nodes. It can handle millions of files, and the data can go from petabytes up to hundreds of petabytes. So it supports a large amount of data. Then what HDFS provides is so how it achieves the fault tolerance is because of replication. So whenever we store one file, it is replicated at least 3 times. So the file is stored in. So if you store one file of 10 GB in the HDFS, it will need 30 GB of space because it will try to keep the copies of same file to achieve the fault tolerance. And it uses the file checksum, data checksum for failure detection. It can correct few of the bits if the data is lost. Then this is optimized for batch processing. So how it is optimized is wherever this data is stored in worker nodes, on the same node, the resource manager will try to schedule the job to execute so that the computation can be done locally. Then it provides the write once and read many access model. So actually, basically, it doesn't support the update model where you are constantly updating the same file. So this is not the best uh, case scenario for Hadoop distributed systems. Or basically, this HDFS doesn't handle that update mode. So whatever data you want to write, you just write it and then try to process it multiple times. Then you can get the better performance.
So Anwarji, can you
Yeah.
comment on so how much redundancy usually in practice is there in terms of either in nodes or probably in the data?
Redundancy.
Redundancy or replication, like
Yeah.
so-
We are
okay.
seeing here.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
So whenever we store, at the bottom there is a client, suppose, and the client is trying to write one block. So the block at the left. So once this block is written, the HDFS will try to replicate the block. So one block will be replicated in the same rack. So this file will be replicated, suppose here. So actually, in case of HDFS, we talk in terms of block. So a file is divided into 64 MB blocks. Those are logical blocks, and that block will be stored in HDFS. So once we store one block in HDFS, the HDFS will replicate it 2 times. So this is the original block. Then another block will be placed in the same rack, and another copy will be kept in another rack. So we have 2 copies in one rack and one copy in another rack. So this is the minimum requirement. You must have at least 3 copies of the same data, and you can increase that to increase the fault tolerance. But generally, companies are using only 3 replicas, and that is the recommended from HDFS.
Sir.
Yeah.
So like usually in industry, like today, the norm is to like have multiple containers, like even within a virtual machine for a
Yeah.
lot of the virtualization. So like is Hadoop, I mean, applications are deployed that way, or like Hadoop jobs also deployed that way, like in Docker containers within and distributed across virtual machines, or is it like a virtual machine is dedicated for this cluster as a whole or multiple virtual machines?
Yeah, as of now, it is like a dedicated virtual machine where you install the Hadoop cluster. So you take 100 VMs, install Hadoop on that, and then you submit the jobs as per your requirement. So that is the current situation. We don't use it like a Kubernetes cluster. So that is something different. We have dedicated cluster in case of Hadoop, which is always running because we need to store the data also, and data should be there in the Hadoop cluster. And the data storage nodes are also responsible for the computation. So this system should be always running. So we will see the another mode in AWS. We have Elastic MapReduce. which runs most like on-demand cluster. So whenever you need, you can, whenever you want to process something, you start a cluster, do the processing, and then terminate the cluster. So that is another way.
So like, and if I want to like scale up, like in case, I mean, like in big companies, like
Yeah,
even in Flipkart, like the big billion days. So
yeah.
is that like, do these cloud providers sort of provide an automated mechanism, like once the existing nodes reach capacity, or is it
Yeah, yeah.
pre-allocated? Okay.
Yeah, it is there. So you can define that if the percentage of CPU utilization is above 50, then you add these many nodes. Or if the disk usage is this much, you add the nodes. So like that, there are various parameters. Based on that, you can dynamically increase the capacity. And another way is scheduled scaling, where you can, so if you know that big billion days are for this 1 week, so you can already inform AWS. So there is a way to directly schedule that for this week, you increase the number of servers to this much. And again, based on that, on top of that, you can also do the memory based and disk based scaling. So if the resource requirement, if the demand is high, again the servers will scale up. So yeah, we have the mechanism this present in AWS for this.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, one important aspect of performance. So when you have data, you should be able to easily query that data. So, and when we have large amount of data, it should be easy to fetch the required records. Suppose you have some data of having 10 billion rows, so you should be able to quickly get the required output out of this 10 billion rows. So to get the output easily, what we need is the partitioning. So you must partition the data wisely so that you can retrieve the results fast. So here we can see, suppose this is the data, this data set is having the date as one of the key. Then what you can do is you can partition the data based on, there can be multiple level of partitioning. So first what you will do is you will partition it by year, then you can partition by month, and then you can partition by day, that day. So whenever you query data for a particular date, like suppose first May of 2014, so you can easily go to the partition of go to the partition of 2014, then go to the month of May, and then inside that you can find the first May folder. So these are actually created as a subdirectories inside the HDFS, and it is easy to retrieve the data. So instead of querying 10 billion, instead of reading 10 billion rows, you just need to read 100,000 rows, and the result can be produced faster. So that's why this partitioning is important for performance. Then we will just briefly go through MapReduce. So MapReduce is a software framework. It was introduced by Google in 2004. So they were already using it for 5 years, and then they published their details in 2004. Then I think around 2008, the Hadoop was developed. So Hadoop was based on this paper written by Google in 2004, and this MapReduce supports distributed computing on large data sets. So how this MapReduce works? Suppose first we'll see this example. Yeah. So there are basically two phases: map phase and reduce phase, where we are trying to map the data. So we will go by the definition of map phase. So if you see the map function, here the input is key value pairs, and output is key value pairs. So let's take one example where we have millions of books and we want to find their occurrences of word in those books. So one map function. So when we run this program in a cluster, so here each box represent one what we can say is a container. So these containers are different than this Kubernetes or Docker containers. One server can host multiple containers. So a container is a combination, just allocation of CPU and memory. So so in a cluster there can be thousands of containers, and each container can launch one map task. So suppose here for one map task we are giving one book as an input. So this book is like book1.txt and it is having some data. So what this map function will do, it will so map function will be like a simple Java program which will read the input, and it will just produce the output as a word and its count in the book. So this has occurred one time, book has occurred one time. So all these occurrences are written by this map function. So once the output is ready in the map, uh, output of map phase is ready. So actually the output is written in the sorted order. So all the mappers will store the result in a sorted manner. And there is another phase called merge. So in the merge phase, we are trying to merge the results of all these mappers and give it to a reduce function. So here if you see, the reduce function is also taking the key and list of values. So for example, this reduce function is having the input as key as data, and it is receiving the number of occurrences 1, and it can be from different mappers. So what the reduce function will do is it will try to sum this, and again it will produce the output as data has occurred 2 times. So this is the reduce phase, and it will process the data. So here what is important is that each reducer will get all the values for a given key. So if the key is for any word like data, so whatever other mappers have produced, all those keys will be compared. So this is actually simply like a merge sort where we merge data from different blocks of data and produce a single result. So the data of one key is present at the reducer. So all the data for one key is present at the reducer, so that reducer can process the data and produce the output. So this is the basic working of MapReduce. Okay. Yeah. So any question about MapReduce you have?
Sir, so reducer can handle only a single key, the data all related to a single key, or it can handle for varieties of keys.
No, here one reducer can handle multiple keys, but data for one key should be grouped and will be grouped and provided to the reducer. So if suppose one key appears in the output of this map and this map, so these two mapper outputs have same key, then this data must go to single reducer. It can't go to multiple reducers. So that is that is handled internally by the framework, so that whatever the keys are there, so those are grouped and provided to the single reducer. But each reducer can handle multiple keys. So suppose that we have only 2 reducers and there are 1000 keys, so 500 keys will go to this reducer, 500 keys will go to this reducer, but the data for these 500 keys must be provided to this reducer, so that this reducer can take the decision and produce some output. So we can have multiple reducers, and multiple reducers can process multiple keys, but data for one key should be available. All the data for one key should be available to the one reducer. So this is the requirement.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the MapReduce had some issues, and because of that, we had to go to another software, that is Spark. So Spark is more faster than Hadoop. So we'll see how. And first, let's take a look what is Spark. So we have a small video. So let me know if you can hear. Can you hear? Are you able to hear?
No, so I think you need to, while sharing, there is an option share system video, system audio or something. Yeah, so could you please start sharing again? And while sharing, you see an option share system video.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably stop sharing. When you start sharing again, immediately you'll see in the bottom there is option. Yeah, stop sharing.
Okay, stop.
Yeah, so while sharing, you'll see an option in the bottom, share system video.
Share screen, advanced sharing options are there.
Yeah, while sharing, I mean, you don't need to go probably. Just in the bottom, you'll see share system
Share sound, share sound, yeah.
Yeah, share computer sound.
Okay.
I'm a co-founder and chief technologist of Databricks, and I also started.
So are you able to hear now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so I will start again.
Hi, I'm Matej Zaharia. I'm a co-founder and chief technologist of Databricks, and I also started the Apache Spark project.
Anwarji, can you increase the volume?
My PhD at UC Berkeley. Today, Apache Spark is the most actively developed open source project in big data, and probably the most.
Yeah, so screen is not visible even to me, so I thought it was lagging. So Anwarji, I cannot see the
Okay,
screen.
okay. Okay, because of network issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think I can see the screen now. Please play the video again, and please increase the volume if possible. Anwarji, can you hear me? Hello. Okay, so I think he somehow dropped from the call. So let me try again adding him again. So everyone, so by the time Anwarji is joining, so let me share the video which he was supposed to play. Can you see and hear the video?
Yes, sir, but volume is not.
No, sir, we are not able to hear.
Sir, no audio.
No, sir, not yet.
No audio, sir. Sir, sir, there is no audio.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear the audio.
Yeah, so that was about Spark. So Anwarji is here again. So Anwarji,
Yeah.
I made you co-host again. So please share your screen for the
Okay.
remaining slides.
Yeah.
Oh, so it seems no audio. Anyways, what I will do, I will share the link with you again. You can watch.
Yeah.
And anyways, probably Anwarji can go ahead with the rest of the slides.
Yeah. So just
Anwarji, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you. I'm just starting.
Hmm. Uh, Anwarji, can you hear me? I cannot hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello.
Can anyone hear me?
Can
Sir,
you
we
hear
are
me?
able to hear you.
Yes, sir, we are able
And
to.
we are able to hear Anwar sir
Yes,
as well.
yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So the Spark, what? So there is actually a story behind the why Spark was created actually. So there the Matei Zaharia, the person who was there in video. So he was studying in the university, and one another student from the same university was participating in one of the coding competition that was from Netflix. So Netflix wanted to create a recommendation system, so they can recommend a new video to the users, and they had some data, and the machine learning code was required to be written to actually produce this recommendation system. So uh, so he was actually the student was trying to use MapReduce for processing, and there were challenges he was facing because of this MapReduce. And actually, basically, what MapReduce does is that output of each. So whenever you have a big program in MapReduce, it won't have single map and reduce phase. It will have suppose 20, 30 map and reduce process phases actually. So output of each phase is returned to the disk, and the next stage will try to read the output from previous stage from the disk. So there is lots of disk write and read involved. And in case of machine learning algorithms, this can take a lot of time. So this was uh, uh, not a good fit for machine learning algorithms, or wherever there is a complex program, the MapReduce was not able to produce the result in less time. So that's why the student who participated in Netflix, he approached Matei, and then Matei written code quickly. So he written, I think, 600 lines of code in 1 week, and that was later named as Spark. And then some improvements were done, but at that time, because of limitations of MapReduce, he created Spark, and then it was used. So what Spark does is that it does the in-memory computing. So instead of using disk for the intermediate outputs, it directly uses RAM. So the read and write time is less. So basically, the write time will be very much less, because writing to the RAM is very fast. That's why it is having 100 times more speed than MapReduce. Then the language difference is there. Then we can use for batch processing. Real time, I don't think still they have support. It is near real time. Spark can work on iterative algorithms also, and yeah, graph processing can also be done.
Oh, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, like, can't we combine like Apache Spark with Kafka to provide real time, or like, is there a subtle difference between that and Apache Storm?
Yeah, actually, the difference between Storm and Spark is that Storm can process each event directly, but in case of Spark, we don't have that. In Spark, what we have to do is we need to specify the interval for which you want to group the data. So you can give, suppose, minimum interval as 1 millisecond, but in 1 millisecond, if there are 10 events, those 10 events will be grouped and then processed by the Spark. But in case of Storm, if there are 10 events, then those 10 events will be processed individually. Those 10 events won't be grouped in a single batch. So what Spark is trying to do is it will try to wait for 1 millisecond. Whatever data is come in 1 millisecond, it will combine and then it will run a small batch. It is called as mini batch. So that's why it is not the real time. It is near real time. But in case of Storm, as soon as the event happens, it will process that. So it won't do any grouping or waiting. Yeah. Okay. And it is easy to use. Yeah. In case of MapReduce, we had to write code in Java, and code for word count also will take many lines, like 40, 50 lines, suppose, at least. But in case of Spark, it should. So we need only 2-3 lines of code. And Spark supports many languages. You can write code in R or R programming, or Python, or Java, or Scala. But in case of MapReduce, mostly code was written in Java. Caching. So yeah, we already discussed. So the data caching is done in memory, so that performance is higher. And in case of MapReduce, it doesn't support caching. So nowadays the trend is to use Spark, but whatever the systems which are already running in MapReduce, those are still using MapReduce. But now mostly companies are switching to Spark. So we have now discussed about these distributed softwares, but how you will get the hardware to run these. So earlier, what was the model? Earlier, before cloud computing, So in my previous company also, what we had was like a 100 node cluster, which was hosted in one of the data center, and company had to pay for the those 100 servers for 24 hours. So because the Hadoop cluster is now hosted on those 100 servers, and we have to pay for entire month for those servers. And if you want to go beyond the hundreds of, so if the cluster is full of data, we need and if we want to add some new nodes, suppose we want 10 extra nodes, we need to contact the data center, tell them that add these many nodes in this rack. So they will take some 3-4 days, and they will add those nodes. So now the cluster becomes 110 nodes. So that was like lots of delay also, and you have to pay for the entire duration. So like for 1 month, you need to pay whatever amount is there, and you might not be using the cluster for the entire month because the whatever batch processing you are doing, it is to take, I think, uh, 8 to 10 hours suppose total, and the rest of 14 hours we are not using the cluster. So that was like a wastage of money, and we need to pay more also. And the time to add nodes was also very long. We need to wait for the days. So with the introduction of cloud computing, what happens is that we need to pay for what we use. So if you are a student and you want to just try out a MapReduce program, then you can just in few clicks you can create a Hadoop cluster and run your program. So it makes easy to run any service in the cloud without you need to worry about hardware setup. So cloud computing provides actually, so video we cannot run, you can check later on. Sorry. Okay, so these are the three top cloud providers. AWS is the oldest. Then we had Azure, and after that Google also came into picture. So actually AWS is the oldest and top cloud provider. Then we have Microsoft as the second top, and then we have Google. So mostly AWS and Azure are used. So what cloud computing provides is, so there are three ways which cloud can provide the services. First is infrastructure as a service. So whatever hardware is there that you can get as a service. So hardware can be a server, then it can be a disk space or a network. So these things you can get from the cloud, and then you can write your own application based on that. Or you can get a platform from the cloud. So platform can be database. Suppose you want a SQL Server database, so that you can get from the cloud. So this will obviously include the infrastructure also. If you request for a SQL Server, it will come with some compute and storage. So this platform can also be can be obtained from the cloud easily. And the third level is the application as a service. So there might be already a few applications created in the cloud, and you just want to use that. So like a financial application. So this application will have its own database and all the underlying things. And we just request the cloud to provide us a finance application, and we pay for based on the suppose number of users. So if there is a software that AWS is providing, so they will bill based on the number of hours the software was used, and that charge should be very less. Instead of setting up all the databases and storage, and then create hosting the application, we can directly request the application from the cloud. So it makes us easy to request the resources, and basically in case of distributed systems, it provides us uh, the required capacity to process the data, because you can now easily add the number of servers, remove the servers, and you can increase the storage also. So these are the basic services provided by the AWS. That is the compute service. So it is called as Elastic Compute Cloud. So here you can create servers with a particular RAM and a disk. We'll see how we can do it. Then it provides the storage as a service. So there are two types of storage, object storage and block storage. So the block storage is mostly like our SGD or HDD, with a disk drive, and object storage is something different, where the Amazon provides. It is similar to actually HDFS. So whatever we have Hadoop distributed file system, the S3 storage is similar to that, but this is implemented by Amazon. Then we have MapReduce service. So they call it as Elastic MapReduce. So this is like a Hadoop cluster on Amazon, which you can scale up, scale down as per your requirement. Then for the analytics, we have Elasticsearch, where we can create inverted index and query that index easily. And this is all we can scale. Okay, so we will quickly go to the AWS and see a few things, and then we can conclude. Can we remove this? So this is actually website of Amazon, aws.amazon.com. So as a student, you can create account, and so actually you need to pay for these services. But for students, they have some a program where they provide free credits. So you can request free credits. I think they will give $100 or something that you can utilize. And they also have a free tier. So in free tier, you can run one Linux server and one Windows server, which is called as T1 small, for 1 year without any charges. So yeah, so these are the services provided by Amazon. So basically, whatever you can think of, all they have, actually all softwares they are providing as a service. Whatever famous softwares are there, so all are provided. Like compute, these many options are there for storage. Then because of database, they have many support for many databases. So we will go to the basic service, that is EC2. So this is the scenario where you want one simple server running in Amazon. So if you go to the instances, so there is no EC2 server created. So I will just go and launch. Okay. So when you create a server, it will ask for the operating system that you want. So all that the information is stored as a Amazon machine image. So this machine image will have operating system, applications already installed. So you just have to select. So suppose if we see the community AMS, so these are some contributed by the community. So based on operating system, you can select. Suppose if you want to run CentOS or suppose Ubuntu server. So for Ubuntu, these many options are there. So based on the version and support for this the supported softwares, there will be different images. So we just select the image as per our requirement. So we have selected the operating system. Now we have to select how much RAM we need and what CPU number of CPUs we need. So if you select, if we see here, so there are a family of instances. So based on the RAM and CPU, they have created different families. Here you can see for this T2 micro is a type of instance. It is having 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM. And if we check the highest supported number of CPUs, so you can get X1E 32X large server with 128 CPUs and 3 terabyte of RAM. So this is also you can get. So actually for each of this type, they have different charges that you have to pay. But yeah, the cloud computing makes it possible for you to create any type of server based on your requirement. So you are not limited to the hardware that we have. So here in case of demo, we will select T2 micro, and this instance you can run for 1 year without any charges. So how many instances we need? Suppose we need 1. Here you can increase the number of instances. Also, you can use this auto scaling group where you can define how to dynamically increase the number of servers. So we will not go into the detail, but here you can define if the CPU utilization goes beyond 90%, then add 1 more server. So those settings you can do here. Then there is a spot instance. So will not, yeah.
Yes, sir. So launch into auto scaling, then charges will be applied according to that dynamically. Means it will be adding upon.
Yeah. So whatever the number of resources were launched, so they will bill it accordingly.
Okay.
And as of now, I think per minute they are charging. Earlier it was work per hour, but now they are charging per minute. So how many number of minutes you have consumed? So for that much they will have some charge. Then there is a concept of spot instances. So the spot instance means actually suppose Amazon is having 10,000 servers and nobody is using all servers. So out of that, suppose 9,000 servers are not being utilized. So those will be offered by Amazon as a spot instances. So and they will have less price. Suppose you have normal instance at $1, they will provide the spot instance as 50 with 50 cents. So you can you will have less cost impact. But the problem with the spot instance is that whenever there is increase in demand, the spot instance will be removed from you and it will be given to another person who is paying more money. So so this is the spot instance concept. Generally, we need it. We use it for computations which are not time sensitive, and we want to save the cost. Then we have to select the network. So of networking and the credentials also we need to specify. So we'll see the storage. So here we have to specify how much storage you need. Suppose we need 8 GB or 10 GB, whatever you need, you can 100 GB, 1000 GB, you can request. You can add new volumes also if you want one more disk. So it will attach two disk to your instance. So just we can check and the launch. And so you need this key pair for accessing the server. So actually, it will create the instance. So, see. So this is the server that is getting created. So like this, you can create the instances and access this. So for accessing, we just need to SSH, use SSH and provide using that key that we mentioned earlier. Using that key, we can connect. I will quickly show the EMR. So we can conclude. Okay, so this is the Elastic MapReduce. So it allows us to create Hadoop clusters. So this is the cluster we are going to create. We have to select the Hadoop version and what applications we need. So if we need a big Hive Hadoop, then if you want HBase, we can select HBase. So we can select which applications you want to run. If you want to run Spark, you can select Spark Hadoop. Okay, now we need to mention the hardware configuration. So as we know, each instance is having its own amount of CPU and RAM. Based on our requirement, we can select what type of instance we want. So we have a wide variety of that. And actually, if you go into the details, so each type of instance is optimized for something. Some instances are optimized for networking, some are optimized for disk write. So based on the requirement, we select the type of instance. Here, the minimum requirement is 3. We should have 1 master and 2 core nodes, but we can increase the number of nodes, whatever we want. Then yeah, we have this scaling option also. If the load on cluster is high, so it will automatically add new nodes. This option is also there. Set the minimum and maximum limit of the instance for the cluster. Okay, so minimum 4 units it can add, and maximum 8 it can add. So we can give the limit that how much it should scale, otherwise it will keep on adding nodes. So there should be some limit. So we specify the limit here. Then again, the key pairs and permission. So it is just this much we need to provide, and it will create a cluster. So here you can see the cluster is starting. Details. So we have requested 1 master instance and 4 core instance. So the core instances will be storing the data, and master will have this name node and a yarn. So generally it takes around 5-10 minutes, but the cluster will start. So like this, you can create the cluster easily in case of EMR. And suppose I just want to run a word count. So I can connect to this cluster master node and submit my program. And once my program is executed, suppose it takes 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, I can terminate the cluster. So I just have to pay for those 5 minutes. So that would be, I think, less than $1. So only that much I have to pay. So it makes easy to create and terminate cluster and to scale the cluster. So we can add the number of nodes easily. And yeah, so it makes things easy using cloud computing. So this is what, so cloud computing is actually the now becoming the standard use case for big data processing. So we have this Spark program running in a EMR cluster, and whenever the batch processing is done, we are terminating the cluster. So that allows cost saving. So that's why this cloud computing model is now widely used. Okay, so I think this should be enough for now. So if you have any questions, then we can go.
Any questions? Please ask.
There are a few references. So yeah, so if you want to study about different systems like the real-time systems and how this Hadoop is integrated with other applications, so this is the best book, Hadoop Application Architectures uh, by Mark Grover. And for AWS free tier, you can see the details here. So here they have mentioned what things are free for 1 year. Then they have separate program called AWS Educate, where you can get some grants. So they will give $100 or $200 for you to use on AWS. So you can send a request through this link. And this is the paper which was published by Google in 2004, which was the base for Hadoop. So you can go through this. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can take. Otherwise, we are good.
Anyone?
Okay. So I think it was a long session. So yeah, it's okay.
No, it is long, but I think it's very informative. And thank you so much, Anwarji. I think it's very, very useful to our students so that at least they can see, I mean, whatever they are learning, how it can be used. And it is being basically used in industry. So wonderful. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So everyone, so let's thanks to Anwarji. So thank you so much, Anwarji.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for your
Thank you,
patience
sir.
in listening.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Okay. So thanks, Anwarji, and
Yeah.
hope to
Okay.
interact with you again
Yeah.
with your informative
Sure.
talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks everyone for staying late. Okay.
Thank you.